So yeah, hi all. Dilan and Hindocha. Thanks for your attention today. Really glad to be here. I recently joined Rubrik. We're a data security company. And I've joined Rubrik X, which is the innovation hub of the company. Rubrik are valued at around 4 billion and growing pre-IPO. I've been in cybersecurity sales for about 15 years. And I most recently joined from a endpoint detection and response company. So I want to take some time just to talk about how cybersecurity is in a bit of a crisis and take the shift and mindset towards recovery. And just to add some context, I think we all know that AI is on the rise in terms of the attack vector, and in terms of Lockbit and ransomware groups. You know, they've taken out about 1,800 victims so far in the first half of this year. So I want to start with data protection and how the market has shifted over the last 20, 30 years or so, and start with kind of the operational recovery era, which was pre-2000. So, you know, fat finger, file loss, recovering a production server, and people were looking for budget to back up their data. This works, great. In the disaster recovery era, think 9/11, think buildings being taken out, and think about disaster recovery. I think during that era, organizations were splitting data centers and separating the backup data away from their production environment. We also had the likes of Zerto and VMware SRM to replicate that data. Budgets increased, but it was really about a high impact event that didn't occur too often. So low frequency but high impact. And we're now in the cyber recovery era. And what's changed is that these types of attacks are way more common, way more frequent. But the impact is also extremely high risk to organizations. There's also the concern around regulatory compliance and being able to report on what happened to the sensitive data once the attack had happened. As we all know, these attacks are crippling and can take out business operations. So very much a trend that's happening nowadays, and we are in the era of exfiltration of file data. And what we're seeing here is very much that, and I hate to say it, that a number of the layers of defense that are in place are being bypassed, and I think we all know that. So we are in the era of assuming breach. And so what happens? And I think the main thing here is about being able to protect the copy of data to make sure it's more resilient in the case of a cyber attack. So what do organizations have in front of them in terms of options? Well, they can either pay the ransom, which none of us really want to be doing, or sorry, I'm double pressing over here. Or they can attempt to recover. And when they attempt to recover, it can be go down the path of engaging IT operations, IT infrastructure to look for a clean backup to recover. In most cases, the backups are compromised because this is what the attackers are targeting. They are looking to encrypt or exfiltrate data that is sensitive to the organization. Alternatively, and at the same time, conjunctively, they may include their security operations team, who are deep in the trenches trying to investigate what's actually happened. The attention and resource of that team is very much focused on the questions to understand how did this happen, where did it come from, what was the blast radius. And so a lot of time and effort is spent on answering these questions. But a lot of the time, it leads back to we don't have a secure backup that we can recover from, and therefore we end up paying the ransom again. So what can we do about this? Well, I want to take the focus towards unstructured data, because a lot of the data that is being created in this world, especially in this kind of AI era, is unstructured. Unstructured data is growing at about 33% year on year and is going to be the target for attackers. The data has grown to petabyte scale, hundreds of millions of files are being created on a regular basis, and organizations need to think about what's sensitive within that data, but also how to protect it. protect it from Lockbit, Play, and other ransomware groups, ransomware as a service groups, who are targeting enterprises to exfiltrate sensitive data, collect their intellectual property, and find a way to hold them at ransom. Not only that, we have data regulations, GDPR, and reporting back to the ICO, which is timely and an effort for organizations when they're in the worst of situations trying to ensure that their data is not compromised. And so a lot of the architecture that is being used to protect in the cyber recovery era is outdated. The traditional forms of backing up and being able to recover unstructured data is built on old architecture. It hasn't been built with scale, cloud, or automation in mind, and this is something that needs a shift in thinking. So, lots of unstructured data out there, and I'm sure your organizations have plenty of this being created on a regular basis. Typically, we think of file data that's being created and accessed and used by our employees in our teams. But a lot of the data that's being created is in different forms. And as you can see on the screen, there's a lot of different types of unstructured data out there in the organization that actually has sensitive data within it. The question we ask ourselves is, has this file data been protected? So I'm going to move into how organizations are currently managing and backing up unstructured data from a technical point of view. If we think about the disaster recovery era, organizations built 2 data centers, maybe more, depending on the scale of their organization, and replicated data, took snapshots on a regular basis. However, that data was still on the network. It was never isolated and never had a logical air gap, and therefore was still available to the attackers who were looking for the sensitive data in the environment. NAS storage is expensive and has been. It's difficult to manage, and in the case of media and entertainment, for example, there might be high-quality videos that are difficult to compress. In these types of designs, there was a lot of vendor lock-in. Typically, a NetApp would talk to a NetApp and a Dell would talk to a Dell. This doesn't really give much flexibility for the IT operations teams. And then there's also NDMP, which is an older method that was an old protocol designed for data management on the network. These are slow, complex ways of managing and backing up data. And typically, in the operational and disaster recovery era, organizations look to companies like Iron Mountain to take that data offsite, have it in a logically air-gapped environment. However, recovering from a tape or tapes is extremely complex. And anyone that knows this, and I'm seeing a couple of people smile, which is validation, it was never really effective. It was slow, cumbersome, and getting to the true results of recovering the files that were critical was almost seen as an impossible task. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I realise I'm running against time here. But these are some of the questions that we ask when data's been compromised. And I'm going to let you read those so I don't read them all to you because you can all read. So what does Rubrik do around unstructured data and file data protection? So I've recently joined Rubrik. I'm only 3 weeks in, so forgive me for the hesitation and the nerves. Oh, missed it. Rubrik can help organizations simplify the data protection at petabyte scale. So we have a piece of software now that we acquired a couple of years ago. It's been built into the Rubrik Security Cloud, which is ultimately a single pane of glass to manage all of an organization's data. We can take 400,000 files a second and scan, index, and move to any other logically air-gapped environment, for example, public cloud. We can also enable organizations to manage this data way more effectively. We can archive stale data. We can inspect the data for sensitive data. But we can also help answer the questions around what happens in the ransomware situation. So what was the blast radius? What was compromised? Are the attackers still here? Which files are safe to recover? But most importantly, when we do think about recovery, we have to think about not reinfecting the environment with ransomware data or applications or whatever it may be. And so the technology is extremely powerful, it doesn't depend on any hardware, and it removes that vendor lock-in because we can now move data from one platform to another, recover en masse at petabyte scale, or recover a single file to the need of the organization. And so we can make that data immutable, we can recover a single file, and all of this is built in with a zero trust architecture to ensure that the backup data is resilient and kept secure away from any malicious activity. We can drive incident data into the SOC for better investigations and improved investigations to help the security operations team leverage AI in that process, but accelerate the cyber recovery to ensure that the downtime is minimized. And so, in summary, essentially what we're doing is helping organizations modernize their unstructured data protection strategies, streamline that at petabyte scale with automation and performance in mind. We can also cyber-proof that data, and unstructured data, like I said, is 80% of an organization's data and is a gap for organizations today. And this is the reason why I've joined to do this, because I've noticed it over the years that the lines of defense can be compromised and the sensitive data is typically unstructured. And lastly, we orchestrate a faster recovery, faster than any other solution, and bring back that data in a more secure and efficient manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilan.